You've mentioned a few times the management systems, and you both argue actually in the book that leaders must also act as chief system designers and not just stay at that higher level of strategy. But what does that actually mean in practice, and how can we get more of the CEOs to actually actively embrace that role?
Basic theory is, in every organization, the things that cause the human beings inside that organization to behave are what we refer to as management systems. It's the fifth box of the strategic choice cascade. There are things like formal evaluation systems. They may be budgets, they may be operating models, but they're also informal cultural things about that promote behavior, like what gets you promoted and what you believe your managers want and the questions they ask. All kinds of things that collectively promote the behavior inside the organization. We think that CEOs ultimately, because they're responsible for the actions of the organization, need to be also responsible for the things that promote the behavior inside the organization. And what we find, again, consistent with the focus on transformation, is that too many times CEOs make very high-level decisions and then effectively outsource the quote-unquote implementation of those decisions to someone else. And the implementation is often the design of these management systems. And then they get designed very much in silos, and they find that these systems tend to create conflict, and therefore overall the system isn't promoting the behavior consistent with the direction that the CEO wants to take. But I know Geoff had a perfect example from earlier this week, so I'll set him up for that.
Well, yeah, and it's I will admit it's a little bit apocryphal, but give me that license and I'll try to play it out. So I was visiting a renewables developer, so a company that had responsibility for essentially doing all the project development in a certain category of renewables. It doesn't really matter which one right now. And I was speaking with their executive team, and they were reflecting on just how hard it is to build momentum in the work that they do, because they're still at an early stage of development. I mean, generally, renewable energy, as while it's taken hold in many parts of the world, we're still early in the stages of it getting to a scale enough where it's cost competitive with every other source of energy in the world, et cetera. And they said it's really hard in those early stages of development because the thing that takes you down and that makes it almost unfinanceable is when you have some project delays in what you're developing. You absolutely have to deliver on time, on budget, in order to meet the covenants of the financing rules that you have. And so they had a theory coming into developing this company and the executive team built up over a number of years. But they said, look, let's run with a radical sense of transparency in this company. And if everyone understands that we're on the same that everyone's on the same page, that we're all trying to reach the same goal, and we're just all very transparent, then that will create a culture where people raise their hands if anything is going to arise that may knock a project off track, off the timeline. That really was the critical thing they were trying to solve for. And so when I was hearing this, what I heard was a senior executive team that was trying to directly influence culture by telling people, we are going to have a culture of transparency. And the reflection that I had in the room for them is it's interesting, but with radical transparency, if everyone can see the consequence of what they do and the result, and if the result is slowing down a project, so if someone were to raise a hand with a concern about a project and they saw the knock-on effects of what that is going to be, then that might actually discourage people raising an issue at the right time. And so instead, if we had senior executives intervene in a different way, which is by rewarding people who raised their hand early on when they saw a problem that was going to knock a project off track, that might actually create the types of outcomes that we're trying to achieve, a lot more than simply declaring that we're going to have transparency. Yeah. And so it was I'd like to think it was a bit of a light bulb situation for this executive team, because they recognized at that time that while they were trying to achieve the right thing, going about it by just implementing a culture as opposed to directly impacting a management system that more directly achieved the behavior that they were trying to accomplish was actually leading them a bit astray. So I'm not sure, Paul, if that helps illuminate things, but it was a really interesting conversation.
Great example. You know what I found, that the best leaders also that I've come across, and that's why this thinking that you put total management systems and taking care of that resonates are people that can be operating up there and are wide, but can also go deep into the organization.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen too many, even former bosses I had, or organizations where complexity was delegated down. Somehow you had arrived at the higher levels, you didn't have to deal with it anymore. But I think great organizations have that capability to delegate some of that complexity upwards without feeling bad about it, and having management really be involved to fine-tune or to hone, as you say, these systems at all different levels. I also like the concept in your book when you talk about the dopamine of good behavior. When you get this right and you're in the groove and you adjust the sails, as you rightfully say, it's actually fun to do because you become more agile and you start sailing.